Let's start with the least terrible of the five and work our way toward the time where being born was basically a planetary emergency. Number 5. The Ice Age. Around 20,000 years ago, Earth was not exactly beginner-friendly. Huge sheets of ice covered massive parts of the planet. Temperatures were much lower than they are today, and a lot of the world looked like a freezer someone had stocked with predators. If you were born here, daily life was pretty simple. Stay warm, find food, and try very hard not to become food yourself. Your home was probably a cave or some kind of shelter made from bones, hides, and optimism. Your clothes were animal skins. Your healthcare system was basically, maybe this plant helps, followed by, well, I guess he's dead. And then there was dinner. Hunting sounds cool until you remember that your target might be a mammoth. That's less go get food, and more go politely argue with a 6-ton tank covered in hair. You and your group had sharpened sticks. The mammoth had size, tusks, and no interest in cooperating. And if the mammoth didn't kill you, cave lions, hyenas, wolves, the cold, or one infected cut probably would. So yes, the Ice Age was awful, but humans still made it through by mastering fire, improving tools, sewing warm clothing, and hunting together. Which is impressive, because most of their long-term planning was probably just stay near the fire and don't fight anything larger than a goat. Unfortunately, humans eventually solved the chase food everywhere problem. And in doing so, they created an entirely new kind of suffering. Number 4. The dawn of agriculture. At first, farming probably sounded like a genius idea. Instead of spending all day running after food, why not just stay in one place and make food grow near your house? Great plan. Very efficient. Almost suspiciously efficient. So humans started settling down, planting crops, domesticating animals, and building the first real villages, which meant civilization was finally getting started. It also meant your life now included repetitive labor, a less varied diet, and enough back pain to make your skeleton a future archaeological warning sign. If you were born during this time, survival no longer depended on chasing mammoths. Now it depended on dirt, weather, and whether the sky felt like ruining your whole village. If the crops failed, everybody failed together. Drought? Problem. Flood? Problem. Insects? Problem. Bad harvest? Congratulations. Your emergency food plan is now stare at empty fields and panic as a community. And living close together created another issue. Disease spread more easily. Waste piled up. Domesticated animals brought new illnesses. Your teeth got worse because of all the starch. So while farming eventually led to cities, writing, and civilization, it also led to malnutrition, crowd diseases, and the exciting realization that your life now depended on wheat not having a bad season. So yes, agriculture changed human history. It also proved that humans are fully capable of inventing new technology and accidentally making life worse in the short term. But at least this misery was mostly local. Our next entry is what happens when an entire war machine shows up and decides your city looks flammable. Number 3. The Mongol invasions. If you were alive in the 13th century and saw a massive dust cloud on the horizon, that was not a weather update. That was the Mongol Empire arriving to absolutely destroy your afternoon. Under Genghis Khan and his successors, the Mongols built the largest contiguous land empire in human history. They moved fast, fought hard, coordinated brilliantly, and used terror as part of the strategy. In other words, they were very good at war, and extremely bad for anyone on the receiving end of it. If you lived anywhere in their path, life could go from normal to catastrophic in minutes. One second you're walking through a market. The next second, horse archers are flying across the landscape, arrows are raining in, and your city's walls are being introduced to a very serious problem. They were basically mobile warfare before mobile warfare was a thing. Like tanks, if tanks could scream, ride horses, and shoot you from a distance. And they didn't just conquer. They often destroyed entire cities, killed huge populations, and used survivors as tools in later campaigns. Historians estimate that Mongol conquests may have killed tens of millions of people. So if the Ice Age was a survival game and agriculture was a management disaster, the Mongol invasions were history deciding that your region needed a hard reset. Still, as terrifying as an army is, armies have one comforting feature. You can usually see them coming. Our next entry removed even that advantage. Number 2. The Black Death. In the mid-14th century, Europe got hit by one of the deadliest pandemics in human history, the The Black Death spread through trade networks, towns, ports, and villages with horrifying speed, carried in part by fleas living on rats, which is already a terrible sentence and only gets worse from there. If you were born into this period, survival became less a skill and more a lottery with deeply upsetting odds. Medieval sanitation was terrible, medical knowledge was weak, and nobody understood germs. So people were trying to fight a plague without even knowing what a bacterium was. Not ideal. Symptoms could include fever, weakness, vomiting, and swollen lymph nodes called buboes. And once people started showing symptoms, things could move quickly. Families disappeared. Entire streets emptied out. Labor systems collapsed. Fear spread almost as fast as the disease. And the medical response included plague doctors wearing bird-like masks stuffed with herbs, which was less advanced medicine, and more, trying to emotionally intimidate death. The Black Death killed somewhere between 30 and 60% of Europe's population. That is such an absurd number that it barely sounds real until you imagine whole villages going silent. No army to fight, no obvious enemy to stab, just invisible death moving from house to house while everyone around you tried increasingly desperate nonsense. And somehow, even that only gets second place, because our number one entry didn't just threaten a continent. It may have nearly ended the human story before it really had a chance to get going. Number 1. The Toba Supervolcano. Around 74,000 years ago, the Toba Supervolcano erupted in what may have been one of the worst events early humans ever experienced. And when I say bad, I don't mean hard winter bad. I mean the sky is wrong, the food is gone, and the planet itself seems to be malfunctioning bad. The eruption sent enormous amounts of ash and material into the atmosphere. That likely blocked sunlight, cooled the climate, and may have triggered a volcanic winter. Plants died back. Ecosystems were disrupted. Animals struggled. And for small human groups already living close to the edge of survival, that is about as helpful as setting your kitchen on fire during a famine. If you were born during this period, daily life was suddenly a long argument with cold, hunger, and uncertainty. Food sources shrank. Landscapes changed. Rivers, forests, and hunting grounds became less reliable. This wasn't the kind of disaster where you wait a week and move on. This was the kind where the whole world starts feeling dimmer, emptier, and much harder to live in. Some scientists think the total human population may have dropped to just a few thousand individuals. If that estimate is even close to true, then humanity came disturbingly close to becoming a very short story. No farming, no stored food, no modern shelter, no backup plan, just a few scattered groups of humans refusing to die while the planet did its best to make that decision difficult. So yes, the Toba eruption takes number 1, because the others were terrible times to be alive. This was a terrible time for humanity to still be a thing at all. So those were 5 of the worst times in history to be born as a human. The Ice Age tried to freeze you. Agriculture trapped you in a relationship with crop failure. The Mongols turned war into a high-speed service. The Black Death made survival a coin flip, and Toba nearly turned humanity into a footnote, which means every person alive today exists because their ancestors somehow crawled through all kinds of absurd misery and still kept the bloodline going. So the next time your day is going badly, just remember, at least your dinner probably doesn't weigh 6 tons and run back at you.